Now, overnight, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with his Russian counterpart as tensions grow along the Ukrainian border. This high-stakes meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, comes just 2 days after President Biden made this comment during his news conference, suggesting he believed Russia is likely to invade Ukraine.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera.
Ukraine's president responded to that comment by tweeting, quote, "There are no minor incursions, just as there are no minor casualties." NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now with the latest on this. Mike, good morning. So let's just start first with the overnight meeting, and then we'll get into some of these comments there. So Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russia's foreign minister, neither was very optimistic going into this meeting that any breakthroughs would come of it. Do we now have any indication of how it went?
Yes, Savannah, that meeting just wrapped up, in fact, after 90 minutes. Now, when reporters were in the room, we heard from both men. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, he repeatedly stressed that he wanted to hear concrete answers from the United States in response to the litany of Russian concerns revolving around Ukraine, especially the potential role of NATO as accepting Ukraine as a member. From the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, he really stressed the unity among our allies as we're facing this and trying to deter Russia from an invasion. And in his comments, he also laid out the two very clear choices that have been put in front of Russia. Let's take a listen to him.
We are, all of us, equally committed to the path of diplomacy and dialogue to try to resolve our differences. But we're also committed, if that proves impossible, and Russia decides to pursue aggression against Ukraine, to a united, swift, and severe response.
So that's what we saw and heard when the reporters were in the room. But obviously, after 90 minutes, a lot more was going to be said. We're going to hear from the Secretary of State at a news conference later. It should be noted that there is a rhythm to these kinds of meetings. Often when we see the Secretary of State meeting with the foreign minister, it precedes some sort of communication directly between the presidents, Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Biden. So that's something we'll be looking for, whether that might be a phone call that happens in the near future.
And I know we'll be hearing from you on that all day, Mike. Now let's talk about those comments. And I mean, really, the damage control that the White House is having to do regarding several comments the president made. I mean, whether it be damage or just confusion, there was a lot to unpack here. So, of course, predicting Russia will invade Ukraine. Also, this minor incursion. We've been hearing that term thrown around a lot now, but kind of making it sound like there might be some small amount of land Russia could take that would be met with less aggressive pushback from the United States. What is the president or his press secretary saying about all of this now?
As we've been seeing this crisis unfold over the last few months, the U.S., our allies, really have been at pains to stress the fact that we are a united front, that whatever Russia does involving a potential invasion, there will be those severe consequences. You just heard Secretary Blinken reiterate that. Where the president clearly got into trouble was expanding, perhaps too bluntly, about some of the internal divisions among our allies, about the sort of range of steps Russia could take and just how unified we would be behind a response. And so when the president had an opportunity for the first time yesterday to speak to the cameras, he tried to clarify those comments and stick back on message. Let's hear the president.
I've been absolutely clear with President Putin. He has no misunderstanding. If any assembled Russian units move across the Ukrainian border, that is an invasion. There is no doubt, let there be no doubt at all, that if Putin makes this choice, Russia will pay a heavy price.
So the prevailing wisdom has been that the U.S. is much more committed to a fuller response, regardless of what Russia does, than some of our allies, especially Germany, who has a big role to play as far as the Nord Stream 2 pipeline issue. And so this is a case, as Joe Biden often says, no one doubts that I mean what I say. Sometimes, though, I say all that I mean. That's clearly the case here.
Yeah, absolutely, including, as you said, kind of exposing these fissures within potential NATO unification there. So, Mike, we just saw the Ukrainian president's response, that tweet where he said there are no minor incursions, just as there are no minor casualties. How is the White House trying to smooth things over with Ukraine, who is, of course, listening to every word the president says?
Absolutely. The White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki yesterday indicated that the president has not spoken with President Zelensky just yet. You could imagine that would be a conversation that happens in the near future. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has stressed that he is in touch on a daily basis, though, with his Ukrainian counterparts to make sure that they're constantly hearing Ukraine's concerns. You can imagine, especially probably instantly after the president's news conference the other night, the phone was ringing for the National Security Advisor. These are conversations, White House officials say, that will continue over the days ahead. One big question was whether the U.S. would participate in what Zelensky has called for, a three-part meeting with the two presidents, Russian President Vladimir Putin, Biden, as well as Zelensky at the table. That's something we haven't seen yet. The U.S. has been open to that, a potential option going forward as well.
All right, Mike Memoli, lots to talk through there and a lot to continue to watch today, which we know you'll be on. Thanks so much.